Hi there, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes single insight can completely change your business directions and allow you to achieve your business goals. In this episode, my guest is Dr. Domenico Lepore. He's the founder of Intelligent Management Inc. He's an international expert and innovator in fields of system-based management. He's the author of several books, and his recent publication is Moving the Chain, the operational solution to embracing complexity in a digital age. If you're a business owner like myself or any business leadership position, you understand how critical it is to gain new perspective to deal with the current challenges. Dr. Domenico talks about how old business models and leadership approaches will not help you to deal with today's complex economical challenges. He also talks about how old processes and old strategies that we built many years ago will not allow you to achieve your business goals in today's complex digital environment. And he also shared his approach, to design organization and how to achieve your goals and how to gain your new perspective and how to achieve your business objectives. So if you like this content, don't forget to give us a thumbs back. Until next time, please welcome my guest, Dr. Domenico Lepore. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is Dr. Domenico Lepore. And I've been going through a lot of your work, Dr. Domenico. It's a lot of books you publish, and you're also founder of Intelligence Management. This discussion is very timely, especially for last couple of years with the disruption where we just gone through. I know a lot of business leaders are looking for to solve a lot of problems, how to scale a company, how to get back in a revenue level. So I think this is very timely. I'm looking forward to learning from you, looking forward to sharing the discussion with our audience. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, Gurmeet. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So walk us through where you see for last couple of years, where you see the biggest disruption in the industry. I know you travel the world and you talk to business leaders in a different continent as well. So where you see what some of those biggest changes happen over the last couple of years?
Well, to me, the way I see it is that digital and the pandemic, they have accelerated dynamics, have changed dynamics in a way that make conventional organizational design and conventional management practices completely obsolete. They have been obsolete for a long time, but people held to what they have. But a moment come when non-sustainable becomes non-sustainable, and so it's with all the disruption and the deaths and the devastation that the pandemic brought, it also brings an opportunity to sincerely reflect on what it means today to do business. And you mentioned the book that my team and I wrote. What we've been writing about, not just in the forms of books, but also in scientific papers, blogs, podcasts, is that in order for an organization to gain or regain competitive advantage, we have to go back to the foundational elements of sustainability for any organization. We have to go back to rethinking the way we generate value for the customer, about rethinking how the competencies that people have can be put to good use. And with it, a new organizational design that eventually overcomes the silo mentality and the silo structures, which are today the main obstacle to both, as I was saying before, digitalization done proper way, and the elimination of all those non-value added activities that the pandemic has brought to the fore. So we need to rethink the way we operate in a more and more decentralized world. We need to have a way of operating that can truly capitalize to what people can offer, removing all those aspects of the way we work that don't make sense anymore.
Do you think by moving to hybrid environment, it did help companies to remove some of those dependency or some of those activity or some of those processes? Just because we were forced to work in a digital environment, not by choice, but by without an option. You think some of that stuff got sorted out by working in a hybrid or working in a remote environment?
I think that working in a remote environment is a tremendous opportunity to focus on what really people come to work for. People come to work, or they should be coming to work, because they have a competence, they have a talent that they can offer to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes this talent was being, sort of diminished or, underused because of corporate policies. And an organization that is structured in silo has very few possibilities to see how to really take advantage of the talents. Working remote means essentially for people to work on activities that have to be synchronized with other people's activities without all the paraphernalia,
Mm-hmm.
very often useless, that come with a conventional functional organization. So it is an opportunity that should not be wasted, because obviously introducing an hybrid way of working, it will require for the organization to morph around a new way of operating. You cannot continue to work in silos with people at distance, because
Mm-hmm.
the very little that you would benefit from a person on site,
Yeah.
it goes away because he's away. So the person is away. So it's a great opportunity, but it should be essentially a prompt to rethink the way we work.
Well, definitely it invites a lot of changes, but any changes, as you know, that it comes from the top. So leadership has to first embrace the changes. Look at so what are the leaders are doing, how they're figuring out, is it a different mindset they need, or they need a different perspective? So
Yeah.
how's the leaders are approaching this, and how they are adopting, or they're figuring out where you see that the changes that they need to apply.
Every year, Gurmeet, this is a very excellent question, and I sincerely hope for the viewers or the listeners to this podcast that don't write me off as too extremist, but
Yeah.
I sincerely believe that leadership today lacks the fundamental knowledge that is needed to lead organization in a complex environment.
Mm-hmm.
Management schools, universities, they do very, very little to provide people who are supposed to lead with the real tools that they need to lead. Also, management, once and for good, should take the front seat in these transformations. In other words, we cannot continue to keep separate concept of leadership and concept of management, concept of productivity with concept of the way we work.
Mm-hmm.
So leaders should equip themselves with a completely new philosophy that is grounded in what is reality, which means complexity. Today, we live in a world that only 20 years ago was radically different. So
Mm-hmm.
any form of conventional management that 20 years ago leaders learned at business school is largely obsolete.
Yeah.
I make sure that every year I can go to business school and tell them how obsolete they are, that they love it. At the same time, they're incapable of changing, because universities are structured in a way that prevent from the knowledge to be deployed the way it should be deployed in a systemic way.
Mm-hmm.
So business school are built in silos, and each silo will teach its own. So you see in business school, silos called systems thinking and silos called cost accounting, the
Yeah.
two of which are completely in antithesis. So in just to summarize, I'm sorry
No,
to
no
be,
worries.
I
Mm-hmm.
think that leadership needs to equip itself, not just with the new mindset, not just with the new outlook on the world. It needs to equip itself with a new knowledge that sadly they don't have. And
That's a hard work, though, especially but to your point, what you mentioned about the universities. I mean, if you're teaching MBA courses from 10 years old books or 15 years old books, everything changed with the blink of eye, for the last couple of years, right? You can't be just teaching old textbooks, has to come from practical, experiences, right? Which is recent experience, right? Um, so this is the biggest challenge for a lot of business leaders. As you mentioned, they gone to school a long time ago. This complex environment, how do they navigate that? Definitely technical side of their business they need to understand, but more importantly, building culture and environments and workplaces. So there's so
yeah,
many complex items they need to get a handle on. So how
yeah.
do they go about it? How do they approach this? Where do they start the journey?
Yeah. Um, when we mention complexity, we look at, first of all, people need to understand that complexity is a body of work that was developed essentially within the realm of physics started about 30, 40 years ago. So nobody is preaching for business leaders to understand physics. What instead we should be preaching is to understand how to apply those principles to the organizations. And so the effort that myself and a certain group of people I've been working with over the years have been doing is to bring back the complexity of managing an organization to the two fundamental issues that help taming or harnessing or embracing complexity. One, according to Dr. Deming, is the understanding of the variation that exists in every process within any organization and viewing the organization as a system. And the one brought about by an Israeli scientist called Eliyahu Goldratt, which invites organization to focus on one element of the system that generates value for the customer that he calls constraint, which unfortunately is still today misled with a bottleneck, which is a completely different kettle of fish. So understanding what is the leverage point, the value that we generate for the customer, and managing a system focused on the constraint and manage the low variation are the two fundamental aspects that enable a more effective way of harnessing complexity. This is not rocket science. It's just the science the rockets are made of. So anybody can learn it. Anybody can learn it if he's willing to, if he has the needs to. So leadership today, Gurmeet, there is a very high call for leadership today, is to understand that anything that more or less worked 20 years ago, it doesn't work anymore. It's not about the flavor of the month. Is understanding what makes an organization successful and sustainable. And as I was saying before, what makes an organization sustainable is the low variation at which they manage well interconnected processes, and what propels their performance is the focus on a finite element of the system called constraint. There are tons of books written on the subject, some better than others. But the fundamental point is if a top management, a board, investors don't start asking hard questions about where do we want to put the constraint and how we're going to manage the system, everything will be, remain where it is. So cutting costs, understanding the nature of the costs, and making decisions on already fallacious accounting principles that have been playing in management for a long, long time. And instead, by embracing a pure systemic view of the organization, we have an opportunity to unleash all the potential that very often is untapped for organization.
So where does that potential lies usually? Is that in a system? Is it in a people? Is it in a process? Or is it just in a management? Where does the potential lies?
Any organization sells value to the customers. There are a chain of events that needs to be built in order to develop that value to the customer. One of those elements is the one that the customers pay more attention to, they're more sensitive to. So an organization should be built on the awareness that if that element is not enhanced, its performances are not optimized, the whole system will be sub-optimized. Which can be something very, very basic, very, very minimal, like managing one machine in an organization, in a manufacturing organization, or can be much more complex and sophisticated, like managing value in the eyes of the customer in a service organization. So think of an hospital. Where is the maximum value that we provide for the customer, which is the patient?
Treatment,
arguably is the operating theater. So if we want to look at the surgeon as the constraint, is the person whose work should be optimized. So everything should be built around the ability of the surgeon to operate optimally. And that applies to every organization, whether it's a sales organization, an R&D organization, a manufacturing organization, a software organization. We should always focus on what generates the maximum value from the system. And then the more we understand this concept, the more we can expand our understanding of what it means to manage an organization, which is nothing but a network of processes and projects, all with the same goal, which is maximizing the throughput of an organization, meaning throughput means the speed at which we generate cash through sales. It's a gigantic exercise of refocusing on those very, very, very few elements that dictate the performance, shedding away all that erroneous, sometimes outlandish rigmarole of activities that normally plague the way organizations operate in the market. So COVID and digitization have brought to the attention of the world the fact that we can work in a different way. It's just a matter of understanding how we should do it. And sadly, business schools don't have any answer for that.
Very interesting. Yeah, no, definitely. If you can approach it that way, the way you just outlined, definitely you can build organizational priorities. What is more important, and I'm going to build in my goals, my objectives towards that. Yeah. And so, what happens that item's not important? You simply eliminate it. You simply don't pay attention to it. Or what happens to those that you've been carrying out for so long, and then all of a sudden you find your priorities are somewhere else.
Right. Well, it's. There are only two kind of activities that and two kind of investments that an organization should really make. One is to maximize what a constraint can do. Yep. And the other one is to have surrounding processes, the one that you call the not essential, that can instead subordinate to the constraint. So when we make an investment, when we take a decision, the question should be always, is the constraint performance, is the performance of the constraint going to improve as a result of that or not? When we make an investment, is this investment going to be useful for the good function of the constraint or not? And let me say it in a different way. In order to function, a constraint needs the rest of the system to subordinate to it, which means that they need to have protection capacity, which means that they cannot be as efficient as cost accountant would like them to be. Because one element of complexity, for instance, the most trivial one, is queue. So in a queue, we see it in telecommunication with the buffering. In a queue, you cannot look at a queue in a system just as a way to manage the pieces. You have to look at it as the dynamics that the queue engenders, and is the only one that can deliver the signal. That's about telecommunication metaphor. In an organization, you have to have all the capacity that you need in order to subordinate to the element that generate the maximum value. In other words, what currently organizations do when they're in trouble, they cut costs all across the board. Which means that they end up jeopardizing the element of the system that generates value and trimming only a little bit of fat from the part of organizations that instead should be refocused on making the constraint work better. If your hard question is, should we be firing more people? The question is not hiring or firing. The question is understanding how we want to generate value and equip the organization with the talents and the work methods that enable the constraint to function at the best. It's a gigantic exercise of refocusing on what matters. And very often in the system, there are things which are misused that can be reused in a more focused manner.
Yeah.
But I have to warn this. This is also an exercise of rethinking why we work, rethinking how we need to think of ourselves in the new scenario, rethinking the covenant that we have with the work and what it means for us. It's an operation of rewiring our relationship with the way we work, and working at distance, remote, is just the tip of the iceberg.
Very interesting. And what you mentioned about that, for the department cutting costs and those scenarios, I see so many mistakes I made in this, especially over the last few years. In my business, technology is that this is where our business is about. And I see business leaders simply saying, okay, I'm going to grow in revenue. I'm going to cut, technology department's budget, for this percentage, or I'm going to cut, HR department's budget by this. But what happens is the budget you're cutting, those are usually primarily the reason that where you're going to scale the business, or you can automate some stuff, or there's opportunities lies in these two departments. So just cutting as a blanket, I'm going to cut budget for the whole department, instead of simply saying, hey, let me find some opportunities. I'm gonna automate what technology I can implement simply build more processes so I don't need maybe as many people, or I can automate, or I can produce more work with the same amount of people. So instead of looking for those opportunities, I see the very common mistakes are made simply just slashing the budget on the whole department.
Yes, I mean, technology should be there to remove a limitation.
Yeah.
So anytime we buy a piece of technology, we should be thinking, what is this going to do for me?
Exactly.
And the more you're focused on the constraint, the easier would be to invest in technology to remove limitations. Clearly, if you embark, let's think about what happened in the last 20, 30 years with ERP systems. SAP became world leader by providing an infinite possibilities on this platform. And the first step was for the accountant to embed into the system all the wrong thinking. So everything else that was built after that had to subordinate to what administrations and cost accounting would dictate. As a result, you had incredibly long implementation times, and a lot of costs and no results. Because, okay, if you have 75 facilities in 3 continents, then a little bit of gaining visibility into operation that SAP provides can be useful. But the average size company that has 1 or 2 facilities and people essentially concentrated in doing what they do in 1 or 2 places, then all you need is for them to provide you information about what generates value for the customer, how to increase the speed at which we deliver, how we can gain more insight and foresight in the analytics, that kind of thing. Those are that remove limitation. So I'm not advocating for more or less technology. I'm advocating for a technology that can help leaders to take the right decisions. But to take the right decisions, you need to have a focusing point that enables you to take good decisions. So technology becomes a detail, a necessary detail, but a detail. What you need to act upon is the way you think the business and the way you restructure the covenant with your people around the business. It's a revolution. It's it's just like Japanese after the World War II, they needed to build everything from scratch. And they called this American scientist called Deming to restructure the way they would, to structure the structure, there was nothing there, to structure the way they would run their industrial operation, having the results that the whole world has seen in the 70s and in the 80s. We are in a similar scenario. Fortunately, there are no bombs, no nuclear bombs yet. But we are in the same situation. We have to rethink structurally the way we are competitive, the way we are sustainable. And instead, all I see is one patch on top of the other. ESG is a patch. Cost cutting is a patch. Technology is a patch. I don't see a lot of thinking on how to really build sustainability in the way we operate. So that's what we're advocating. Our small firm is doing every year 3, 4, 5, there's not many of us, jobs with organization of all sizes, wanting to bootstrap them into a level of success that they didn't even believe is possible. And sometimes it's just a matter of removing some artificially imposed cognitive bottlenecks, cognitive constraints. It's just removing the curtain that they have in front of their eyes, even before thinking of what can be done next. Well, but again, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's for people that have the guts and the vision to do something radically different.
Well, business leaders I know that I work with, we are so focused on a daily stuff, day-to-day operations. So sometimes you're so buried under that, you can't even lift your head up and see what you're not seeing properly. And, even you can see that there's so many blind spots that you're not aware of it. So, I see it's 2 ways. One, you can invest a lot of time to educate yourself, but be aware of it and go through a lot of books, a lot of literature, from people. Or another way of is working with somebody like you will be much faster. So, you already have a wealth of knowledge. Bring somebody and just, work with somebody and you can get there much faster instead of you just going through, step-by-step learning and having a long process, then shorten the process. Is what do you see that some of the obstacles people face when they go on their own learning stuff, or versus they work with somebody else, they can get there much faster?
Gurmeet, there is no replacement for knowledge. You can't install knowledge. So a little bit of homework is mandatory. However, what we found very useful is for us to act as a catalyst of a thought process that people already have. The only organization we cannot work with are organizations that do not believe that their thought processes could be evolved. But as soon as an organization, so mainly the boards and the top management, are open to a frank conversation of what are the limiting beliefs with which they manage the organization and how to remove them, then the gateways, the heaven's gate open up, and is one success after another. But the main hurdle, Gurmeet, is for people to understand that the current way of thinking is obsolete. And when I mean obsolete, I mean totally incapable of capturing the inherent complexity in which we operate. The being busy all the time and not having time to stop, it's a clear symptom of the fact that people are not focusing on what they should be focusing. And instead, they try to focus on everything. And as a result, they don't focus on anything. So again, it's a discipline. And we never had a shortage of courageous business leader wanting to embark in this. And despite some failure that everybody has, generally speaking, the results have been outstanding. And with outstanding, I mean 10 times more than people thought were possible, because otherwise you don't need to. We're not in a world where we can be content with 10% improvement every year. The windows of opportunities are what they are, and we need to be fast. So any organization that understands that and is willing to have an open conversation about how to accelerate the growth of the company and scale the growth of the company, then we are they were more than happy to have a conversation with.
So even somebody starts with an open mindset, that they go through the path you just as the outline, they do their homework, they learn, and they work with somebody like you. What are some of the challenges that there's always a challenge down the path, right? You're always going to face some of the challenges, whether it's a people challenges when you're making a change, a lot of change management issue comes up, it's a lot of a challenge. So where you see some of the biggest challenges people face when they go through this process?
Essentially, there's a very precise question, Gurmeet, and I'll try to be as precise as possible. What changes in the new scenario is people's relationship with what they do. Because very often, especially in less young people, what they do is who they think they are. And in changing the way of doing things, they fear that they're changing themselves. They status, they modus operandi, they all part of the persona that they build for themselves at work. And so you have this plethora of conversations about, the work, the balance of work life, working less, working more, working at distance. These are all palliative. These are all chit chats that all they do is just to obscure, put a curtain in front of what the real problem is. And the real problem is that we need to be able to change our relationship with how we work and why we work. So asking fundamental questions to people is the only way to understand whether people are suitable in that particular enterprise for that kind of change or not. And again, learning is not mandatory, but neither is survival. So you may decide that change process is too complicated. Then you have to accept the reality that going under is reality. So this, unfortunately, the window for organizations to scale up and be sustainable is not very, very, very big. So we need to be fast and we need to be thorough. And the only way to be fast and thorough is to equip yourself with a much stronger ability to think the cause-effect relationship that make up the reality that we live in. So knowledge, but also reflecting on how we think and equipping yourself with a superior way of tackling issue through language and through thinking. So it's, again, we're talking, Gurmeet, about complexity. This is not a world in which when there is a problem, we fix it and we're good. And it's not even about fixing more and more problems every day. It's about seeing reality in a completely different way, which is the reality of complexity.
Yeah, that's something, I totally agree with you. That's something where I see a lot of business leaders struggle and driving a change to our organization, whether it's mindset, whether it's thinking, whether it's the systems, whether it's the process changes, but any change, just simply paralyze them, simply because that, what's going to happen, if I make a little bit of change in a business, so, especially in my world, in a technology world, everything has to be changed. Any operational item has to be changed. But that's where I see a lot of business leaders, just freeze that, because it's going to introduce a change in a company and how they're going to manage the change. I see that's biggest challenges, especially in Ontario where we are, business leaders are struggling with that. Simply, it's just going to drive a change through the organization.
Yeah. Yes, Gurmeet, this is business leaders that will soon cease to be business leaders if they don't embrace the change. As I said, I mean, it's a failure is always a word that is present in everybody's vocabulary. And sometimes people accept failure more gracefully than they accept change. Sometimes, though, these people have the responsibility for the lives of many others. So what I would recommend to any business leader is to understand whether he really wants to lead a business or not. Because
changes are happening regardless, like it or not.
Regardless. So, and what I want to say is that ours, the approach that we bring to the company, and let me use a big Greek word, is an epistemological stance. It's a stance based on knowledge, not a stance based on artistry or a stance based on creativity or a stance based on let's try and see this. There is very little empiricism in what we do, because most of what can be done within a paradigm of knowledge that minimizes the possibility for the output to be different from what we had anticipated. So for us, management is about knowing what's going to happen if you do certain things. So we have a very, very well engineered path for taking organization to remove what we call cognitive constraints from their path. Cognitive constraints means the inherent limitation that we build for ourselves as a result of the experience, and that defines the perimeter within which we can operate. And when that perimeter is too narrow, when the area within the perimeter is too small, we begin to suffer. So how can we expand that? By removing some of the mental models that prevent us from perceiving the larger reality we're all in. And we are limited, so we will never be able to perceive everything, but start broadening what we can conceive. We can see avenues very quickly that we didn't see before. And there is a very precise path that we have strived to communicate at the best of our ability. We have a huge website with thousands of pages dedicated to how you can move from silo to system in a way that is manageable and doesn't scare you. So I would invite any business leader to take a peek at our website to see what they understand or they don't understand. And if somebody wants to entertain a conversation, we are delighted to do it. Another thing that I care very much to say, we never think about money. We think about generating results. And for us, money is the result of results that we generate. So there is very little risk. The only real risk is to accept the fact that you, business leader, you're not as good as you thought you were. So if you accept that and you can remove some of your limitations, you can expand and have much more success. I hope I'm not too blunt.
I see. Very interesting. Technology has been maturing over the last few years. A lot of systems, I know they mature quite a bit, especially when a COVID. I think software developers worked overtime, or just to build more systems during this COVID time. So where you see the maturity from technology, is that helping you build those systems, or is that helping business leader to visualize some of that stuff, what they need to build a process around or build the systems around? Where you see, what are your thoughts on a maturity on a technology for last 5, 6 years?
Well, I think that there is a huge opportunity for software people to begin to understand what software means and what it should be for. Okay, which is something that the vast majority of software people, software is like manufacturing in the 80s. It's in a moment of strong internal constraint. So anybody that can press a few keys and produce a few lines of code today as business. So I think that the technology industry, especially the software industry, has an enormous opportunity to start creating values if they accept the idea of doing stuff that removes limitations. As far as the company, other organizations that use technology, the point is, what is that technology for? What that technology should help you for? And if you're clear about what technology should help you for, then it becomes very simple to dictate the software people what needs to be done. But again, this is management, and management has always been not much glamorous, not very glamorous. So nobody wants to really be in management. People have eloped into this fantasy of leadership that anybody is a leader today, okay? And instead, we should be focusing on management, which is the way we transform an idea that obviously somebody has to have into reality. So a company needs a leader. It doesn't need 26 leaders. They need a leader, and then they need competent people that can bring about that vision through intelligent management, through being minimally rational and well organized in the way we orchestrate the talents that we have. We call that network of projects, which is the organizational design that we propose to any company that wants to scale up quickly and want to capitalize on people's talents.
So does that mean that in what you mentioned, network of projects, that every, most, from your, process or your thoughts or your eyes, that everything's considered as a project in a company, and then you just deliver results from every project? Is that what it is?
As a company is not, other than besides some, repetitive processes, they need to be in place, which can be taken care of by any good quality system based on processes. But a company make money because they launch projects where there are new initiatives, new technology, marketing campaigns, anything. Anything that an organization does to make money is about projects. And you have a finite capacity made of people with their talents. So the more talents we have, the more competencies we have, the more we can deploy them effectively to a precise algorithm, the more things that we can do. And in order to prove, to exemplify what we meant in the books that we have published, we even build the software, which was for us, it was like going to the dentist, not exactly a pleasant experience, because we had to deal with the stuff that we didn't want to deal with, which is software. So what we did was to build the mathematics for it. So we teamed up with a team of brilliant mathematicians. We developed a very, very, very strong algorithm to take into account how to deploy finite number of competencies through a multitude of projects. And when the mathematics was solid, we asked the software people to compile it, and it went very, very smooth. So in other words, the problems of complexity are not addressed by asking a group of guys to press keys and produce code. It's addressed by understanding how we have to tackle an issue and then find the right technology for it. Sometimes building it, because what an organization needs in terms of software, even I don't know what you do precisely, Gurmeet, but your organization could really, really, with very little investment, build a software that can truly help organizations, provided that organizations are game to think of themselves in a way they never thought before. Otherwise, you'd be tasked with producing millions of lines of code that you will sell and nothing will happen.
Yeah,
So
it's a business value and business logic is behind the piece of software is always more important than just a piece of line of codes, right? Anybody can write the codes, but yeah, what business logic are you capturing and what business value are you delivering other side with a piece of software, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Very interesting. So to talk about a little bit your background, how did you get involved into organization, understanding this intelligence management, and how do you get so good at that? So if you give us a little bit of your background.
I'm beginning to be a little bit old, Gurmeet, so it's a long story.
I think we're in the same age group, probably.
I think you're 20 years younger than me, but anyway.
Okay.
I started off as a physicist. My background is I'm Italian. Well, I'm also Canadian now, but I grew up in southern Italy, and I did all my schooling and my university, my research work there. But then, as I didn't have enough talent to win the Nobel Prize or to give any contribution to physics, I asked asking myself, what can I do to do something useful in the world that I can leverage a certain ability to think that is not good enough for physics, but it could be good enough for something else. And as soon as I asked myself that question, I came across the work of two physicists, two giants of management, Dr. Deming, who is the founder of the quality movement, and Dr. Goldratt, who developed a body of knowledge called theory of constraints. And for 5 years, I worked at the School of Entrepreneurship of the Ministry of Industry in Milan, where I was exposed to hundreds of companies of every size. And after 5 years, I left and I set up my own company with the precise goal of bringing to especially mid-sized companies. I had large customers, super small customers, but I think a mid-sized company, it's the natural terrain for this methodology to flourish. We started to bring to mid-sized companies this approach, and in a country that was as entrepreneurial as Italy is, to a fault, we brought some good innovations and had very good results. And going forward, we met larger companies, and then there was something that triggered my coming first to the States and then to Canada, and now we live like bums, traveling around, and so COVID was good, so I was able to sleep for a year, so that was good. And also companies discovered that a lot of things can be done at distance, including consultancy, so that was good. So essentially what we do is to bring a little bit of sanity into the lunacy of silo thinking and its sheer inability to cope with the changes that digital and now COVID they brought about. So we spend an inordinate amount of time writing about what we do. When I say inordinate, I'm saying at least 25% of our working time is spent in communicating what we do, because we think we can play a non-negligible role in the transition of the business world from the sheer fantasy they live on today to a better way of managing. So we're in the business of making organizations sustainable. So that's the business that we're in.
Very interesting. You mentioned one point during just in the last point you made, that mid-sized company was a real good candidate, what you just mentioned. I'm trying to understand why that was, because they're looking to scale up, or they're looking to grow, or is there something else that you thought was interesting in those companies?
Maybe I misspoke. Let me rephrase it. Any organization that is still very, very cognizant of the way operations should be run, meaning an organization that it's where the CEO is entirely focused on making operation thrive, from sales to production, research and development, that organization is suitable. Unfortunately, when you work with organizations that are very large and the CEO are totally separated from the way the operation work, then is where it starts being a little bit more complicated. I've been involved in situations where they would sub-optimize the production because the tax advisor said that the tax advisor was suggesting the scheduling processes of the facility because there's that level of lunacy. So instead of thinking, how can I produce more and better, they were thinking, how can I save taxes? So that's exactly the wrong thinking. In a mid-sized company, and with mid-sized company, a 500 people software house is a fairly large organization. A 500 people manufacturing company can be considered small. We work with the whole range, but we are having a lot of joy lately working with organizations which are scaling up very, very quickly. They started in a garage three years ago, and now they have 150 employees, but they're looking for a way to grow without falling into the trap of conventional silos. We are being involved at the moment in Alberta in a spectacular growth of a company that is growing 10 times a year. Okay, so as a result of imagining a completely new way of providing their service to the oil and gas industry. What I'm trying to say is that any business you're in, okay, the example that I make is that unless you try to sell pork cutlet at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, which has a very limited market, okay, unless you're in that business, any business has the possibility to grow 10 times, any business, whatever field. And we run a program that was invented by Dr. Goldratt called Viable Vision, where we can take any organization that is selling 100 today and makes 10 as profit in 4 years to make 100 as profit, any organization. And you got to believe me, it's almost mechanical. It's almost mechanical. All entrepreneurs need to understand is that they're only limited by the mental models that they have. So the more they're willing to challenge those mental models, the quicker they can get to those results. I never met any organization that couldn't grow 10 times as a result of removing those limitations. Any organization can grow 10 times, any organization. So, that is what creates sustainability. Because if we fall into the trap of thinking that having a 10% increase every year is a good thing, look at how the market is growing, especially in everything which is technological, when markets are growing. In Italy, I'm very involved with the fashion industry. The fashion industry grows, every year grows 30, 40, 50%. So if you only grow 10%, you're losing market share.
Losing opportunities.
Losing opportunities, that's right. So.
Very interesting. Especially, Ontario's been, Toronto's been tech hub these days. A lot of startup companies. There's a lot of transactional monies, for either raising funds or doing M&As kind of transitions, right? And these companies is very, very critical for them to scale up because they are startups. They just want to scale up. I think they will draw a lot of value from our discussion today. There's a lot for them to take away and scale up because they all need to scale up. They got investors to satisfy.
Yeah. Let me just, as you mentioned, in Canada, not so much today, but up until a few months ago, investors were, especially in Ontario, were happy to throw money at everything that would look technological. So we have created a whole downtown of people developing apps. They don't have the faintest clue about what they're doing. Okay, and investors, following the usual logic, they say, okay, let me invest in 100 companies. If only 2 are successful, I get my money back. This is the very definition of non-sustainable.
Yeah.
Okay, non-sustainable. So my advice to every startup is that stop drinking latte, stop thinking about the benefits that you have, stop thinking about how cute it is to work in an office downtown, and start thinking on how you can create value through getting organized in a way that value can be delivered.
Yeah.
So any startup that has the willingness to face reality, we're open to talk. And by the way, 99% of the money that institutions and investors have thrown a startup in Canada, they went bust.
Yeah.
Because they simply didn't have any clue of what these companies were doing, and the companies didn't have any clue about what they were doing.
Yeah. Especially every product that if you can't sell, put an AI sticker on it, and when you put an AI on it, okay, they must be good, right?
Yeah, that's right. So AI means AI should mean human intelligence translated into an algorithm. It's not artificial. There's nothing artificial about it. It's all human. But people don't understand that. They finance Bay Street believes in these fantasies. They think that they can extract value out of the transaction. It's the whole economic model that is flawed. It's the whole Silicon Valley model that is flawed. And in Canada, and I say it as a proud Canadian, we are followers. We are not leaders. We should start being leaders, embracing ideas that can help us lead.
Very interesting. Wow. I know I learned so much from our discussion. I know the business leaders will watch, definitely, they should, I would recommend, go check out your website. And I'm also going to include your list of all your books as well. Get a copy of your books, learn from your wisdom, and check out a lot of blogs I saw on your website. There's a lot of good blogs as well, and, reach out to you for kind of conversation. Who knows where the conversation can take you, right? I learned so much. Definitely, anybody watching, they're going to learn so much from our discussion as well. Any word of wisdom you want to leave for business leaders? I know a lot of them in similar situations that I am. They are looking, past COVID. How do we scale these companies? Where do we start? Maybe different way of looking at the product, different way of looking at services. We got to re-innovate what we were doing before. So any word of wisdom that, where they can start or how they go about it? I know we talk about it this couple times.
What I would say to anybody that wants to listen, that hasn't written me off already, which I think is going to be the vast majority, just give me a call, because I think in 30 minutes, I can show you what is the path that you should be following. And again, it's not about money. It's about making sure that your talent are not wasted. So my word of advice is don't waste your talent. Don't get erroneous, fallacious, obsolete organizational model to trample over your talent. But equip your talent with what it takes for your talent to produce results.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for your time. Hope we'll talk soon in the future.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.